Yesterday, as the nation was still in shock over the death of Raila Odinga, something else quietly unfolded at State House. President William Ruto signed 8 new bills into law. We are talking about 8 guys, all in one day. And not just any bills. These are laws that now touch the very core of our lives, our land, our digital space, our economy, our privacy, and even how we live and trade online. To many Kenyans, that timing felt off. I mean, as the country mourned one of its most consequential opposition leaders, the government was busy reshaping the nation's future. Guys, here are a couple of comments from you on X. Anne said, "We shall revisit this. The fact that you've chosen to post this right now means those bills are suspect. You know very well Kenyans are distracted by Baba's death. We shall revisit." And then Kibet said, "There's something mischievous about these bills, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Time will tell. First, they are being assented into law while everyone is focused on Raila. If you are paying attention to even the president's Twitter account or the X account, people are really waiting for a condolence message, right? But then, before that, while the news was still going on, while people were actually now getting wind of, Raila's passing, the first thing he did tweet about these bills that he had assented into law. But beyond the timing, maybe we are reading into it very much. Maybe this is something they had already organized and it had to go on so that they could attend to what would happen, the rest of the day. It was a busy day for them. So let's not read much into the timing. But we have to be honest. This is a story about control. The way these bills were signed, it's a story about control, power, and the kind of country we are slowly becoming. So today, let's go law by law, right? To see what truly works for us and what doesn't. The first one is the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Amendment Bill. It's now a law. It was introduced and proposed by Wajir East MP Aden Daud Mohammed. The government says it's meant to protect us from online fraud, SIM swap, data theft, cyberbullying, child exploitation, and terrorism. And let's be honest, Kenya's digital space is growing fast. You guys, you're witnessing the growth, right? We've seen real cyber threats, identity thefts, and cases where people lose their savings overnight. So yes, on paper, this law sounds like something a responsible government should pass. But this law also expands the state's authority in several ways. It allows them to decide what kind of online content is harmful or false. It gives them the right to block entire websites or social media pages, and it even allows them to demand takedowns or restrict access without court orders in some cases. In short, it gives the government a switch, a digital kill switch that can silence you first and then justify their actions later. This law doesn't just target criminals. It quietly gives government agencies expanded powers to take down online content, block access to websites, as we've said, and even monitor digital communications, all in the name of national security. And you see, that phrase, national security, has always been a clever disguise. It is the magic line or the magic words every government uses when they want more control without being questioned. The same law that can stop a hacker from stealing your data can also silence a whistleblower exposing corruption. The same power that is going to protect your child from online predators can also be used to arrest journalists, bloggers, or anyone who dares to speak truth to power. Groups like Article 19, a respected international human rights organization, have already warned that this bill threatens Kenya's constitutional right to freedom of expression. They said the language in the law is dangerously vague. Terms like false information, harmful content, and threat to public order have no clear definition. And in a country where dissent has always been punished, vague laws are about to become powerful weapons. Because when the law doesn't clearly define what is wrong, then power gets to decide what is wrong. And when power decides what is wrong, this stops being justice. This becomes control. Think about it. If a Kenyan citizen exposes corruption on X, like the way we had the Adanis, etc., or even if a YouTuber questions a government project, that post could easily be labeled as harmful to public order. And once that label is applied, your content can be deleted, your account can be frozen, or your channel can actually be pulled down, all perfectly legal, of course, thanks to this law. So yes, the government can now say we are protecting you from scammers, but what they don't say is they are also protecting themselves from you, from your truth, from your ability to mobilize, document, and expose. When Ruto's administration faced protests earlier last year and this year, activists and journalists were always being arrested under the existing Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act of 2018. Now, imagine those same arrests under a law that gives the state even broader powers, it is going to give them the faster triggers and fewer checks. This is definitely not about keeping us safe online. It's about keeping us quiet online. And look at the timing. As the country was busy mourning Raila Odinga, a man whose political life was built on the right to question power, a new law was signed that makes questioning power even riskier. That is not a coincidence. The truth is, this is not about cybercrime alone. This is about control. Control over narrative, over information, over truth itself. And when a government begins to control the story, it begins to control the people. And that is how democracies are dimmed. Not through coups, but through quite well-drafted laws that look harmless until they are used against you. And guys, the fine for this is something else. 10 years or 20 million fine. So I can see a lot of you will be thinking, should I tweet this or should I not? Should I tweet this or should I not? I don't know what you guys think about this law. I get it. There are so many crimes that needed to be curbed, but I think someone also saw an opportunity to bring in something else. So you guys feel protected, but they also take your voice from you. I don't know. You guys tell me on the comment section. But let's move into another law that quietly made its way to the president's desk. This is the Privatization Bill of 2025. And this one doesn't deal with, cyber or etc. It deals with ownership of what belongs to all of us. The bill was introduced by the National Treasury and Economic Planning Ministry and sponsored in Parliament by Kimani Ichung'wah, one of President Ruto's most trusted political allies. Kenya had already replaced the old Privatization Act of 2005 with a new framework in 2023. The 2025 bill reenacts and revises that framework after legal challenges and debate over Parliament's approval role. The earlier 2023 law removed Parliament's direct approval requirement. The 2025 law continues that shift with ongoing dispute about the extent of parliamentary oversight. Here is what this means in plain language, right? Before, if the government wanted to sell a public company, a public what? A public company, say Kenya Pipeline, Kenya Ports Authority, Mumias, or even parts of KICs, whatever public company you guys know, it needed Parliament's approval. Now, under this new law, the Treasury can privatize those assets without seeking Parliament's consent. No public debate, no televised sessions, no pushback from elected leaders. We think this is a good decision, this benefits the country, so let's do it. Everything can now be done through a board appointed by who? The president, right? And this board will be here to decide which public corporations to sell to who and at what price. Now, supporters say this law will make it easier for government to attract investment, reduce debt, and remove inefficiencies in struggling state corporations. They say privatization will bring in new capital and management expertise. And well, that sounds logical on paper. The dangers are enormous. Because when you remove public oversight, you open the door to what? Secret and silent deals. You give a small group of politically connected people the power to dispose of assets built with whose money? Taxpayers' money. And you remove the one institution that is supposed to represent the will of the people, Parliament, right? Guys, how is this going to work out? In short, the Privatization Bill, which is now a law, shifts the control of Kenya's wealth from public hands to private ones without public accountability. Critics, including economists, unions, and civil society groups, have warned that this is how national assets quietly disappear. They say Kenya's history with privatization is already painful. You guys, you know about this from the sale of Uchumi, Kenya Railways, Mumias Sugar, right? Where corruption, undervaluation, and inside deals were the order of the day. Now, this new law revives that same system. Only this time, it gives it full legal protection. And you have to ask, if the last time we privatized, we lost jobs, industries, and communities were left to suffer, what is different now? Let us be honest. This law does not exist to fix broken institutions. First, they should have fixed themselves. This law now exists to make them sellable. And once, you know, these institutions are gone, they are gone for good. So now, what will end up being sold in all this are these profitable assets, the ports, the pipelines, the energy plants, the banks, you know, the very foundations of Kenya's economy. Imagine this. A future government wakes up and decides to sell 40% of Kenya Ports Authority to a foreign company. They do it quietly because now they can. They are legally protected. You find out months later when tariffs rise, jobs are cut, and profits, you know, are leaving the country, going somewhere else. And when you ask questions, you are told it was done under the law. That is what this law legalizes. Dispossession without paperwork, without public accountability or scrutiny. Right? Economists have also warned that this new framework could be used to settle political debts or reward loyal financiers. Now, in a country where corruption is systematic, privatization often becomes a polite word for auction. To make it worse, the same law allows the new privatization authority to operate with limited transparency. No requirement to disclose full sale details until after transactions are complete. Shay! That means Kenya will learn, or you Kenyans will learn about billion shillings deals only after they've already been signed. Let us call this what it is. This law is not about efficiency. It is about control and convenience. It takes oversight away from the public and gives power to the few. And it was signed on a day when the nation was mourning, which tells you everything you need to know about timing. You guys won't have time to question it, right? You won't have time to question it. And then now if you start questioning it, the Cybercrime Act comes for you. No, you are causing what? Tension. You are doing whatever. You can't even now. I don't know. I'm really interested to hear your views on this. Because you guys, did you send your public participation on these matters? Anyway, the question is, why pass these bills why assent into these bills right now? Why now? Why now also? When Kenya's debt is high, when the IMF is watching, and when the government is desperate for cash. Because privatization, for many struggling governments, becomes a shortcut to raise money. Sell what you can when you can to whoever is willing when you're still in power. But in the long run, it is the citizens who will pay the price. Once you sell the port, you can't reclaim it. Once you privatize the power grid, you can't control pricing. Once you sell the national airline, if you will sell it, you lose sovereignty of our own skies, you know. And once you sell the country's asset, you are selling a part of our independence. So yes, the privatization law now, 2025, may look like an economic reform because I know we are desperate for money. But it is actually a political decision with long-term consequences. It will decide who owns Kenya's future, the people or handful of these investors, right? Guys, I don't know. Anyway, let's talk about land. I saw a lot of you debating about land yesterday. I think for me, the most interesting part about the time we are in right now is kitambo these things would just be passed, assented to, and people wouldn't question. But you see now how this thing works. You know, be careful of even the people you are sending to, the people you are giving power. Because these people hold your decision, they hold your future in their hands, and there is nothing you guys can do about it later on. So you have to be very intentional. Go register, please. Go register. Go register so 2027 you guys can make better choices. Yeah. Anyway, after controlling the internet and selling all our assets, where does power go to next? The soil. Let's talk about land, because one of the laws President Ruto signed yesterday is the National Land Commission Bill of 2023. And if you understand Kenya, then you know nothing stirs more emotions, more betrayal, not pain, than the question of land. The bill was sponsored by the Departmental Committee on Lands, chaired by Joash Nyamoko, and backed fully by the Ministry of Lands, Public Works, Housing and Urban Development. This was not a random proposal. It came from within government, and it carried the clear fingerprints of the executive's land reform agenda. Now, the bill's stated purpose sounds good. I won't argue with that. It is meant to give the National Land Commission more power to review historical land injustices, to finally help Kenyans who lost land through irregular means, right? It promises fairness, it promises redress, it promises closure. But in Kenya, power never comes without a price, because, well, this law allows the commission to reopen old cases. It also places a strict time limit on when claims can be filed. If you miss that deadline, your case is gone. No matter how serious the injustice or how poor or how remote you are, the clock runs out, get out of here. And who suffers most from such deadlines? Not the rich, not these people who are politically connected, but the smallholder farmer in different places of this country, the displaced families in Mau, the widows who are in Embu, Kisumu, Meru, wherever. The people who don't even know where to start. It is the people who have been wronged the longest who will once again find justice out of reach. This amendment also gives the National Land Commission power to initiate investigations on its own. That sounds good until you remember what country we are in. Because in Kenya, on its own often means when told. It's on its own, but someone is controlling the button somewhere, The remote is with someone else. And when institutions are captured, investigations don't begin where injustice lives. They begin where power points. There is more. The law expands who can challenge a land allocation, introducing the risk of politically driven petitions. It opens the door for both genuine claims and manufactured ones, the kind that powerful people use to unsettle communities or reclaim property through legal backdoors, right? So, well, the government is saying this is about justice. The truth is, it also creates a new form of insecurity. Every title deed, every lease, every boundary could now be questioned. The ordinary Kenyan who thought their land was safe might wake up one day to find, their history is under review. A certain tycoon is claiming this was our land 50 years ago. And if you know how Kenya works, then you know this. The people with the most resources, we are talking about people with these resources who have lawyers, connections, and time, are the ones who win land disputes, not the people with memories or graves on that soil. If so, why do we still have conservancies in places where local natives used to live? Yeah, why do we have these conservancies that are charging $1 million a night for people to vacation there, but they know very well this is not their land? This is not their land because they have connections, they have resources, they know someone in government, and they know you guys can continue talking about the conservation lie all you want. We are not living. This is us legally. Anyway, guys, this law is kind of good. Now start actually. If you know someone is sitting on your ancestors' land, now is the time to start acting on it. Tell people to donate for you whatever fees you need. But this is also a perfect time for you to start correcting these injustices. But now, imagine a mother who lives, who has lived her entire life on land her father tilled. She has a title deed. She's paid taxes, raised children there, buried relatives there. Then one day, you have a powerful individual who is filing a claim saying the land was irregularly allocated 50 years ago. And now she's dragged into these hearings, lawyers she can't afford, processes she can't even understand. And then when she loses, the world will say, but the law was followed, right? That is how injustices hide behind the word lawful. So yes, the amendment brings back the commission's review powers, but it also brings back the fear that history is about to repeat itself. Because when the state gets to decide whose injustice matters, the system stops being about fairness. It becomes about loyalty and who do you know. So when they tell us this law is about addressing historical injustices, and some of them are still sitting on lands they can't even tell us how they acquired those land, please remember that line has been used before. From independence, to now, land reforms have always come wrapped in good intentions and ended in elite benefit, because land in Kenya has never just been about the soil. It's about power. It's about the few elite who own land in this country, while other people are busy struggling to even afford a 20 by 20, right? So if you ask me also, this one is going to open us up to corruption. Why? Because if you know someone you can give a 100K afanye hivi, you just do it. Me, I'm just worried for people who will not even afford a shilling. Ama they will come and they will say, it's okay, I don't have to continue this, but I need 30 acres from this land. And then you'll be like, I don't have the legal fee, I can't afford, I'm not connected, so let me just give this person this piece of land. Ndio hii story ishe. I don't know what you think about that, but now let's talk about a law that was also signed yesterday, and this one did not attract many headlines, but it affects every Kenyan who owns leases or dreams of owning land. Sometimes you just sit and say, by the way, I just knew of all these laws. Land had to be somewhere. Land had to be somewhere. Anyway, the bill, which is now a law, was introduced by the Ministry of Lands and Physical Planning under the leadership of Cabinet Secretary Alice Wahome. It went through the National Assembly's Department Committee on Lands, chaired by Joash Nyamoko, before being passed and sent to the President for assent. On paper again, this law is presented as a way to modernize land administration and streamline processes. The government says it will make land management more efficient, close loopholes used by cartels. The government said it will close loopholes used by cartels. Kwani cartels are not in... Anyways, they will also say they are going to improve service delivery. But the reality underneath those promises is very complicated. The land bill changes several things about how land in Kenya is managed. First, it gives the government broader powers to adjust land rates and service fees. This means the cost of renewing a lease, processing a title deed, or registering property could increase sharply, not by law, but by regulation. It also gives the Cabinet Secretary more discretion to define these fees. And whenever discretion enters a law, just make abuse is not far behind. So if you are a farmer in Eldoret or you are a small homeowner in Kiambu, this law means the cost of simply holding on to your land might go up. Not because you did anything wrong, but because the government needs more revenue. I saw someone ask, then why do I have to own land if I have to keep paying for land? Who told you that land is yours? Who told you that land is yours? Kulipa mutalipa hapa mpaka mseme. We don't have to own land anymore. And that is the goal. Own nothing and be happy. That is the goal, to make sure these people upset you completely, that you don't even find the need to own a piece of land. And guys, without soil, I don't know. Anyway, once all these things happen, people with limited income will start doing what? Losing land. Not through theft or fraud, of course, but through unaffordable compliance. Sina pesa, munanitax shamba yenye mimi sina pesa, niwatolee wapi? And then you start giving up, right? The second major change is in compulsory acquisition. The law gives the state more room to take land in the name of public interest for roads, dams, or government projects. But the phrase public interest isn't clearly defined, which means it can be stretched to fit almost anything. If history has taught us anything, it is that public interest in Kenya has often meant what again? Private gain. Hmm? So while this new law claims to speed up development, it also weakens the protection citizens have, over their property. In short, the state can take your land more easily, pay what it deems fair, and move on. And once it's gone, you can't even fight with City Hall because it was done under the law. The third change, and this one might sound small, but it is huge, is the shift in how land records are handled. The law gives the Lands Ministry greater control over registration systems and data. That means the same office accused of losing files. How many times have you heard your file was lost? Or files were lost? Or issuing double titles. So you've heard that. Now, this ministry now has even more authority, but with less external oversight. Should they not have fixed that first? Critics argue, this bill was pushed through too quickly and without proper public consultation. They want that it concentrates power in the ministry while weakening independent oversight from institutions like the National Land Commission. In other words, it moves land governance away from transparency and closer to the political center. Remember, these changes are coming at a time when the country is still struggling with unresolved land disputes, historical injustices, and illegal allocations. So why now? Why give more power to a system that has already failed to protect ordinary citizens? Why? Many people suspect this law is part of a larger plan to consolidate control by making it easier to revalue land, to adjust rates, and to acquire property in the name of development. The state positions itself at the center of every major land transaction. Well, I'm already tired. That means big developers and political elites can navigate the system easily, while ordinary citizens, drown in bureaucracy, fees, and threats of repossession. Usipolipia rates, we are taking this land. The biggest danger here isn't what is written. It is what is missing. There is no strong oversight, no clear safeguards, and no direct representation for citizens in how decisions are made. This one, mutalia. But, when you hear government officials say this law will improve efficiency, please understand what that really means. It will make it easier for the state to take, tax, and transfer land, and also harder for you to question it. And if you question it in a way they do not want, then Cybercrime Act comes into play. Anyway, let's talk about another law that Ruto signed yesterday. And this is one that most people ignored because it sounds so noble. The Wildlife Conservation and Management Bill of 2023. It sounds like something everyone should support, right? Conservation, wildlife, protecting Kenya's natural heritage. Who could possibly say no to that? I don't want you to say no to that. But to understand it properly, we need to look at what it actually changes. The bill was introduced by the Ministry of Tourism, Wildlife and Heritage and tabled in Parliament by the Departmental Committee on Environmental and Natural Resources. It amends Kenya's main wildlife law, the Wildlife Conservation and Management Act of 2013, to update how wildlife areas are managed, how communities benefit from them, and how revenue is shared. Here is what that law really does. First, it adds new rules on benefit sharing. It says that at least 5% of income from national parks, reserves, and conservancies must go directly to local communities living around those areas. Now may have a problem there. 5% why? First, those conservancies exist in whose land? Right? They are benefiting in whose land? So there is no way Kenyans are supposed to settle for the 5% because you have conservancies and resorts which are making money through carbon credits. I mean, last time we were talking about Batuk. Batuk was training in a private conservancy and the money was going to the owner of that conservancy, not even the government of Kenya. So you cannot simply say you will give the local communities 5%. You are giving me 5% from my land. How about you leave and leave me my land, right? They say that money will support development projects, things like schools, water or infrastructure, to make sure people who live near wildlife areas actually see some benefit from them. Right? I'm not going to repeat. Guys, read the big conservation lie, because we know how this language works. We'll do the schools, the hospitals, etc., etc. You guys read the book so you can understand why this never makes sense. Anyway, first, stop talking the language of 5%. Well, we have colonial masters still sitting in our lands, and elites here who got land. They can't even explain to us how an ordinary Kenyan ended up with thousands and thousands of hectares of land where local people are suffering. No, that is not the language we want to hear. We do not want to hear that 5%. Anyway, the law, secondly, formally recognizes Amboseli National Park as a national reserve. That move transfers the park's management from national government to the county government of Kajiado, something that had been debated for years. I'm a bit happy about this part, The ministry says the goal is to allow counties to have a more direct role in managing local wildlife and tourism resources. My worry is, can you trust the county leaders? Can you trust those county leaders to serve in the interest of the people? That I will leave you to answer. Thirdly, the amendment introduces joint management frameworks between the national and county governments. It gives counties more say in managing parks and reserves within their areas, but still under overall coordination with the Kenya Wildlife Service. We've had a problem with the Kenya Wildlife Service because we know it is not controlled by Kenyans. Look at their board. They are also saying the idea is to improve collaboration and reduce conflicts between local communities and conservation authorities. The question they did not answer is, why is there tension between local communities and these conservancies? And it's because you are sitting on someone's land. So maybe actually what this law should have done is, can we give this land back to the community? Can you let lions exist with the people? Can you let the elephants exist with the people? Why are we normalizing having 1 elephant or 5 elephants conserved in 300,000 acres of land, and people are still suffering? Anyway, finally, the bill expands the scope of wildlife conservation to include ecosystem services, things like forests, water catchments, and climate adaptation efforts, aligning Kenya's wildlife policy with modern environmental goals. Modern environmental goals. Anyway, those are the key facts. There is no clause in this amendment that hands community land to foreign organizations or NGOs, right? However, conservation experts and local community groups have said that while the law is a positive step, the government still needs to be careful with how these benefit sharing and management agreements are implemented. In the past, poorly monitored partnerships between conservancies and NGOs have caused conflict and displacement in some areas, especially in places like Laikipia and Samburu. So the concern now is not that the law itself is bad, but also how will this be applied on the ground. Supporters are saying this amendment finally gives local communities a fair stake in Kenya's tourism wealth. But critics caution that without transparency and strong oversight, the benefits might still end up captured by elites or organizations rather than the people living closest to the wildlife. In simple terms, the Wildlife Conservation and Management Bill, which is now a law of 2023, is about updating conservation law, sharing revenue fairly, and bringing counties closer to decision making. It doesn't change land ownership or hand power to foreign groups, but how it is implemented will determine whether it truly empowers communities or simply changes the paperwork. Me, by the way, all I'm saying is give people back their land. This whole conservation, until people can be able to get their land back, stop talking to us in this language. We do not want, because even in that list, the people who own large tracts of land under conservancies are not, they don't benefit Kenyans, but today is not the day for this whole conservation conversation. If you need more, read our book, right? Now, let's take a closer look at the National Police Service Commission. This was the Amendment Bill of 2024, which is now a law. The law touches on the people who carry the guns, you know, the one who stand between order and chaos. On paper, this bill actually looks good. It was introduced to promote police welfare and mental health, to streamline disciplinary procedures, and to clarify how power is shared between the Inspector General and the National Police Service Commission, and also to strengthen professionalism and accountability within the service. Sounds good, right? And to be fair, it should be, because Kenya's police service has long struggled with low morale, poor working conditions, and political interference. The law introduces several major changes. First, it requires every county to establish a police wellness and counseling center. These centers are meant to offer psychological support, trauma counseling, and rehabilitation for officers dealing with stress and exposure to violence. It is a necessary move, a very necessary move, because suicides, shootings, and mental breakdowns within the police force, they've become common. But there's a catch here. Unless the Treasury actually funds them, these centers will remain ideas on paper, like many hospitals and social projects that never get past, you know, this ribbon cutting day when they come and say, yeah, this is what we are doing, but later on you follow it, nothing more is happening. The amendment also expands the role of the National Police Service Commission. The commission now handles career progression and promotions in coordination with the Inspector General, as well as disciplinary appeals, transfers, and general human resource policy across all police units. This is significant because for years, the IG and the commission have been in constant tough war, you know, over who controls what. And when you go back now to the 2010 Constitution, it split command and management. The IG handles operations, while the Commission manages careers. This new law tilts the balance slightly back towards the Commission, giving it clearer authority and a stronger voice in internal disputes. Another key provision gives officers a clear path to appeal disciplinary actions. If an officer feels unfairly punished or victimized, they can now take their case to the commission, and its decisions will be binding on the Inspector General. In theory, that will definitely reduce arbitrary dismissals and help create a fair system within the force. The amendment also formalizes professional standards and vetting. The commission is now required to establish permanent mechanisms for continuous vetting, performance appraisal, and training. That is a big shift because past vetting processes were very weird, you know, they were very reactive and easily politicized. Now, it becomes part of everyday police management. And for the first time, welfare and housing are clearly written into law as part of the commission's statutory duties. That means fair housing, pay, and deployment policies are not just policy matters, they are now legal obligations. But even with all these positive steps, the law leaves a few cracks open, and those cracks could still be exploited. The first risk is political interference. Remember, members of the Police Service Commission are appointed by the President. So, giving them more power over promotions and discipline could quietly replace internal abuse with what? Political manipulation. I mean, the President could say, I want that and that and that, and there it goes. You know, again, they'll be here rewarding what? Loyalty. And you will have people who you don't understand rising through the ranks and you don't know how they got there, right? Now, the second issue, as we said, is budget dependency. The commission still relies on the executive for funding. Guys, we really need to go through this because remember, police are not just police. You know, without an independent budget, the same carrot and stick dynamic remains. Those who align with the powers will definitely get more support because, again, you need money. You need something, so you do what I'm asking you to do. So, this is, I don't know how this will work, but let's wish for the best. Let's take a look at the third concern, because here there is a blur line between command and management. The Constitution separates them, but in practice, they overlap. Who really decides transfers or promotions? The IG or the Commission? The law clarifies some procedures, but it doesn't fully seal the cracks. So future disputes could easily end up back in court. And finally, there's the issue of implementation. Building wellness centers across 47 counties sounds great on paper, but counties already struggle to fund what? Hospitals, clinics, health staff. Without dedicated funding, these centers will risk being symbolic rather than functional. Mtasikianga tu, bado ijakuja hakuna pesa. And why does this matter, you might ask? Lynn, why are you talking too much about this police thing, Because Kenya's police are both what? Victims in this matter and enforcers. They are overworked, underpaid, and often used by politicians as tools of control. You've seen maandamano. You've seen how these people behave, by the way. Ukiwakanyanga vibaya, they bring all their frustration to the field and they decide, this is your last day on earth. We will even unalive you in front of cameras. Anyway, this whole law tries to fix part of that, the welfare side, but it still sits within a structure vulnerable to political pressure. If it's implemented properly, I have hope this could be a great turning point to the country. But if it's abused, it could become another shiny reform that hides the same old rot, a wellness sticker on a broken system that will never be implemented. But don't judge this law by the signing ceremony. Judge it by what happens next. Just watch who gets promoted. Watch whether those wellness centers actually open, and watch if police officers who appeal disciplinary cases start to win them. That is how we will know whether this law is a true reform or just another political theatric. And lastly, I think we are almost done here. Another law that President signed yesterday is the Virtual Asset Service Providers Bill of 2025, what many people are calling Kenya's crypto law. The bill, I'm telling you the people who introduced it, so if anything goes wrong, know who you're going after, right? Anyway, the bill was introduced by the National Treasury, working alongside the Capital Markets Authority and the Central Bank of Kenya. It was sponsored in Parliament by Kimani Ichung'wah, and it's part of a broader effort by the government to regulate Kenya's growing digital economy. On the surface, the goal of this law makes sense. For years, Kenya's crypto market has operated in a very gray zone. Fast growing, it is also full of opportunities, but it's also full of risk. Thousands of young Kenyans have lost money on online scams, fake investment platforms, and unregulated trading apps. The government says this law will now fix that by setting clear rules, licensing crypto businesses, and protecting consumers. And to be fair, that is something many people have called for. This is something many people have waited for. But as with most laws, the real conversation begins when you read the details. The Virtual Asset Providers Bill requires anyone offering crypto-related services like exchanges, digital wallets, or blockchain-based apps to be licensed by either the Central Bank of Kenya or the Capital Markets Authority. It also gives regulators the power to monitor transactions, request information, and enforce anti-money laundering measures. That means Kenya now has a formal legal framework for digital assets, a first in the region. Supporters say this will boost confidence, attract investors, and make Kenya a hub of fintech innovation. But critics are raising very few important questions. They worry that the licensing process might be expensive or bureaucratic, locking out young innovators and small startups. They also warn that strict compliance requirements could discourage local developers, especially those who've been building creative blockchain solutions outside traditional finance. There are also other privacy concerns. That bill allows regulators to request transaction data from licensed providers. Well, this is meant to fight crime. It could also mean more government visibility into private financial activity, something that needs clear safeguards to prevent abuse. And then there is the bigger conversation. Crypto was born as a decentralized system meant to give people more control over their money, free from the oversight of banks and politicians. So naturally, when a government steps in to regulate it, some people worry it could defeat that original purpose. It is a delicate balance. Regulations can protect people, but too much of it can also slow innovation. And Kenya now has to figure out where that balance lies. The law also comes just months after the central bank announced plans to explore what? A central bank digital currency. A digital version of the Kenyan shillings, combined now with the new crypto framework. This signals a shift. Kenya is moving toward a more formal state-supervised digital economy. Whatever that. Now, whether you guys decide that becomes a step forward or a step toward title control will depend on how transparently this gets implemented. Because on one hand, this law could make Kenya a leader in digital finance across Africa. But on the other, if regulation becomes too restrictive or too politicized, especially politicized, it could push out local talent and hand the space to who? Big foreign platforms. So, this is not just a story about crypto. It is also a story about access. Who gets to participate in Kenya's digital future? Will it be the young innovators who have been experimenting and building for years, or large corporations that can afford licenses, lobby for favorable policies, and dominate the space once it's formalized? The answer to those questions will determine whether this law truly empowers Kenyans or simply organizes a digital economy around a few big players. Let me know what you guys think about that on the comment section, especially if you're in this innovative field. Let me know what you think. And lastly, I know this one has been long, guys, but you can archive or come back and watch it later, because I know this is very important and there's a reason we had to cover all 8. As you can see, some are good, but some are very questionable. You get to ask yourself, was this supposed to be there, or this is good so that guys don't get to see the bad? But let's get into the last one. This is the Air Passenger Service Charge Amendment Bill of 2025. Sounds very technical, maybe even boring. A law about airports and service fees. Lynn, what is here? But this quietly changes how money from air travel is collected and shared. Kila kitu ni pesa. So, penye pakona pesa, we also have to question. The bill, officially known as the National Assembly Bill number 35 of 2025, was sponsored again by Kimani Ichung'wah and supported by the National... Hey, how many of these has Kimani sponsored? Anyway, it was supported by the National Treasury and the Cabinet Secretary, Professor Njuguna. It was part of the government's ongoing effort to reorganize how aviation revenue is managed. And here's what the law actually does. Before this amendment, every time you bought a ticket, a flight ticket, whether local or international, you paid what is called the Air Passenger Service Charge. For years, that fee was split between a few key institutions: the Kenya Airports Authority, that is KAA, which runs our airports; the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, which regulates flight safety; and the Tourism Promotion Fund, which helps market Kenya as a travel destination. That money funded airport maintenance, safety systems, and tourism programs. Are we together until there? The 2025 amendment changes that structure. It adds 2 more beneficiaries: the Kenya Met Department, which provides weather and aviation forecast, and the Tourism Fund, which replaces the old Tourism Promotion Fund. It also gives the Cabinet Secretary for Transport the power to decide, through regulations published in the Kenya Gazette, exactly how that revenue will be shared among these bodies. Supporters say the move will make revenue distribution more efficient and ensure that key agencies, especially those tied to safety and tourism, have consistent funding. Critics, however, note that by shifting more control to the Cabinet Secretary, and the Cabinet Secretary equals to what? The government, right? The amendment reduces direct parliamentary oversight on how those funds are allocated. So once again, Parliament, nyinyi fanyeni aje, kaeni nje. They want that future changes to revenue shares could happen quietly through regulations, not open debate. In simple terms, this law doesn't raise new taxes or introduce new fees. No, it changes who gets the money and who decides how it's shared. It gives the Transport Ministry greater flexibility over aviation revenue, something supporters call modernization, and others are also calling it concentration of power. That is the essence of the Air Passenger Service Bill, a quite financial law with real implications for transparency and accountability in Kenya's aviation sector. Now, anyways, guys, that's the much I could do trying to understand these laws for myself and even for yourself. And I saw someone raising a very important question. No matter how much now we oppose what has already been assented to, there were days where people should have actually had these conversations, public participations, etc., etc. So someone is saying, if you did not raise this concern earlier on, this is now a law and there's not much that can be done. But I refuse to agree that there's not much that can be done. I believe that we are existing, no matter how strict the laws become, we also exist in a country where it's us the people, it's we the people who have the power. So I don't want us to say that there's nothing else that can be done. Go through those laws. The documents are online, guys. Take a look at them. I know the terms can be a bit harder. You know, no one loves paperwork. No one wants to go through a bill that has 5 pages, etc., etc. But I've really tried to summarize the best way I know how, and I hope we've not made an error in summarizing. And if we've done, just point it out on the comment section, and we'll definitely correct it there on the comment section as well. For me, what did not sit right, it is the privatization bill, the cybercrime one, and also the lands. I feel like the other ones were just there to neutralize the situation and make people say, okay, this is not bad, this is a win, but we really have to be careful with these laws and how they are going to impact us in the future. But let me know what your thoughts are, and please go through this, because for me, I won't lie, it was just off to see these people there, even the CS, all of them there witnessing as Ruto, you know, was signing this, knowing very well we had breaking news. If you ask me, someone took advantage of a very, very painful situation, because they know for the next 5 or 1 week, none of you is going to question everything. And even if you question, there are more important news, you know, there are more breaking news that we should be paying attention to. So at the end of the day, if you ask me, someone saw an opportunity here, they grabbed it, and they knew definitely by signing these bills into law, people were going to question. But now, I don't know, but let me know what your thoughts are on the comment section. I know it's a grieving moment for the country, and I hope we can also, I don't know, even as we go through what we are going through, let's pay keen attention to what is happening that might not get, you know, might not be on your headlines. Let's pay key attention to that. But I love that people are actually having these conversations on X. People are analyzing these things by themselves. So let me know on the comment section, what is off about all this? What have you loved? What is not adding up? And where do we go from here, right? I also appreciate the new subscribers that we have on the platform. Thank you for getting us to 1.41 million subscribers. I do not take that for granted. I really do appreciate you. And just an appreciation also to Team LNN. It takes a lot of people to put these things together. It's not always easy, but we try to give you the best we can. So thank you everyone that participates in the research, everyone that participates in the filming and the editing of these projects. We do not take that for granted. Support our work. If you want to support independent journalism, there's an MPESA number there. There's a PayBill number there. Account is also there. And also we have PayPal. And even if you can't, do not forget to subscribe and share these videos with your loved ones so that they can be able to put 1 + 1 together. I know it's been long. You can watch it in half. Watch some today, tomorrow, but make sure that you watch all of it. Sawa sawa. All right, see you hopefully guys tomorrow, and take care of yourselves. Okay, bye.